I'm Ritika. Welcome to PLN Casefile. Landmark Judgment, MC Mehta versus Union of India. Oleum Gas Leak Case, 1987. The judgment that created the doctrine of absolute liability. What happens when a hazardous industrial plant leaks toxic gas into the surrounding community? Who is legally responsible? Can a company escape a liability by claiming that the accident was beyond its control? In 1987, the Supreme Court answered these questions through a landmark judgment that permanently changed Indian environmental law. Today, we explore MC Mehta versus Union of India, better known as the Oleum Gas Leak case, the judgment that introduced the doctrine of absolute liability. The background. The case arose after the leakage of oleum gas from a chemical plant operated by Shriram Foods and Fertilizer Industries in Delhi. The incident occurred soon after the world had witnessed the devastating Bhopal gas tragedy, raising serious concerns about industrial safety and public protection. Public interest advocate MC Mehta approached the Supreme Court seeking stronger safeguards for hazardous industries. The court recognized that India's growing industrialization demanded a legal principle capable of protecting citizens from modern industrial risks. The legal question. At that time, Indian courts generally relied upon the English common law principle established in Rylands versus Fletcher. Under that rule, a person bringing dangerous substances onto their land could be held strictly liable if those substances escaped and caused damage. However, the rule recognized several exceptions, for example, acts of God, acts of third parties, consent of the affected person, plaintiff's own fault. The Supreme Court asked an important question. Should hazardous industries operating in modern India continue to benefit from these exceptions? The court answered no. The doctrine of absolute liability. In one of the most important developments in Indian tort law, the Supreme Court evolved the doctrine of absolute liability. The court held, if an enterprise is engaged in a hazardous or inherently dangerous activity and harm results from that activity, the enterprise is absolutely liable to compensate those affected. Unlike the English rule, there are no exceptions. The court reasoned that enterprises engaged in hazardous activities possess greater resources, expertise, and control over the risks they create. Therefore, they must bear the responsibility when those risks materialize. Why this judgment changed Indian law? The judgment transformed Indian environmental jurisprudence. It encouraged industries handling hazardous substances to adopt higher safety standards. It also strengthened constitutional protection under Article 21, recognizing that the right to life includes the right to live in a safe and healthy environment. The principles developed in this case later influence environmental regulation, industrial compliance, disaster management, and corporate responsibility across India. Why it still matters today? Today, the doctrine of absolute liability continues to influence cases involving chemical industries, hazardous waste, industrial pollution, environmental disasters, public health risks. As India expands its manufacturing, energy, and chemical sectors, this judgment remains a cornerstone of environmental accountability. It reminds us that economic development must always be accompanied by legal responsibility. MC Mehta versus Union of India is remembered not only for resolving one industrial accident, but for creating an entirely new legal principle. The doctrine of absolute liability demonstrated that constitutional courts can develop legal doctrines suited to India's unique social and industrial realities. Today, it remains one of the defining judgments in Indian environmental and constitutional law. This was PLN Casefile. I'm Ritika. Thank you for watching. Join us next week as we continue exploring the landmark judgments that shaped India's legal system.